why we're doing this way?
I was going to ask if he is the person who does that. So
He is. So
yeah.
great. I'm going to call this meeting to order. The recording has begun. This is Karen Leo Hill, Chair of the Fair and Impartial Policing / Welcoming Lebanon Ordinance Task Force, and I'm going to turn it over to Paula Mayville to give us the spiel.
All righty. So hold on just one second because I got to get it open on my computer. So, pursuant to Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, issued March 23, 2020, under Executive Order 2020-04, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, this meeting is being conducted virtually through MS Teams and by phone without a quorum physically present. Due to the risk of spreading COVID-19, it is not practical for the Fair and Impartial Policing Task Force to meet in person, nor is it practical for presenters or members of the public to meet with the task force. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please ask to be recognized by the chair at the time your desired topic is discussed by the task force. And if you're participating by phone and wish to speak on an item, please dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Paula.
You're welcome.
And the other thing that Sean will do is that he is able to pull up the agenda for us and share his screen, and then also other documents. So if you don't mind queuing that up, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
So we'll be looking for the agenda plus, the backup documents. So whatever is posted on the city website, we'll do that. All right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start with a roll call for the task force members. We know that unfortunately Barry Schuster is not able to be with us tonight. And other than that, it looks like we are all here. So let's see. Sue Prentice.
Here.
Thank you. Diane Root.
Here.
Devin Wilson. Devin, I didn't hear you. Are you here, Devin? I see you. All right, Devin Wilkie is here. I see him in the chat, but I am not hearing him when he speaks. So we'll come back to Devin. Okay, Casey Montas.
Here.
Great, thank you, Casey. Kathy Beckett.
Here.
Wonderful, and let's just see. Devin, do we have you by voice? All right, and now I'm not seeing Devin, but I'm thinking that he's probably trying to reconnect. Maybe he just had a bad connection. I know that we also have Bernie Waugh, the city attorney on this matter, with us tonight. Hi, Bernie.
Hello, good evening.
All right, thank you so much for being here. And we also have Paula Mayville, who just read that announcement, who is currently sitting in as the city manager since Sean Mulholland is on vacation. And we're lucky that we have her here. Let's see, I'm just waiting to see if Devin presents himself. Just as a heads up for the agenda tonight, we've been doing a lot of work and we're kind of coming into the home stretch. And so over the past few months, we've taken up each provision of the ordinance that was passed by the voters of the city of Lebanon back in March. We have been working on each, different members of the task force have taken the lead on working on different provisions that we had identified together with the city attorney as needing some clarification or perhaps some modifications, and then working on them as a committee together as a task force. And so now we're kind of coming to the end. We've had a lot of good discussions. We've built some consensus. We've really gotten to a place where I'm thinking that about 80% of our work is done. And so here we are in the month. The idea is that by the end of this month, we'll be forwarding a set of recommendations to the Lebanon City Council that they will take up in October before and make a and make a vote on any changes that we're recommending prior to this ordinance being enacted in January. So I see Devin Wilkie is back with us. Devin, are you able to unmute yourself and announce your presence for the roll call? Hello, Devin. How disappointing. Okay, let me see. So I see Devin's name, but we're not hearing him. Devin, do you want to just speak with us in the chat and let us know if you're here? Okay, Sue Prentice, I think I saw your hand raised. Did you want to say something? No? Okay, that's fine.
I've let him in.
Okay, gotcha.
Let him in a couple of times. And Devin usually doesn't have a problem, so I don't know what's.
Oh, I see. Devin is on his phone for audio. So Devin, why don't you, did you press *6 to unmute yourself? And I know from doing this for council meetings that there's like an 8-second delay. So let's give Devin a chance to unmute himself. And then, so you have to press *6 and she'll tell you if you're muted or unmuted. And then we'll give you 8 seconds and you can say, I'm here.
Yes, can I be heard now?
Wonderful. Devin, you are here. Okay.
Fine, thank
Good. So that's it. So we'll just have to bear in mind that Devin is going to potentially have a little bit of a delay, and that is just how it works when you're participating by phone. So we'll all be aware of that, and I think that's going to work just fine then. No problem. Okay, I have to. So Paula, would you be able to share the agenda for tonight's meeting, please?
Hold on just 1 minute.
Yep.
I'll be right back with you.
I will take this opportunity to confess that I did not finish the minutes that I promised, and so I will have to promise them for the next meeting. I'm sorry. And but I did make the changes to everyone's names that I was supposed to make from the last meeting, so that's good. And normally our meetings will have a chance for the committee to work on to do our work, and then around 7:45 we will break for public comment. Of course, if someone has something that they want to add, they certainly can, but just know that we are gonna take a formal break at around 7:45 to take public testimony. Just want to give a chance for Paula to be able to share her screen so that the public can follow along with us.
Well, I'm having technical difficulties and I cannot get this. Oh, I know why. I will be back in just, I've got the wrong thing in the council presentation section. Come on.
Okay. All right, but you're getting there.
I am. I apologize. My computer's acting a little slow at the moment too.
Well, we know broadband is an issue for everyone, even if you're downtown Lebanon.
Right.
Unfortunately.
All right, let's see. Come on. Okay, can you see my screen?
We do see your screen right now, but it is just the folder that you were looking at.
So it's not the agenda.
Well, it looks like maybe it's thinking. I don't see the spinning circle of doom.
So I see it on my screen.
Okay. Okay, well,
If the open for you, maybe you need to change the share to that specific document. For right now, it's only sharing your folders.
All right, hold on.
That's a good point, Casey. Thank you. Yes, there we
Now
are.
it's there? Okay, there we go.
Yes, excellent. All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, so here we go. So we're going to skip over the acceptance of minutes and address those at our next meeting, which will be 2 weeks from tonight. So it will be September 15th. And now let's go ahead and move on to our discussion items. So basically everything is up for discussion tonight, but we can start with, if you can go ahead and scroll down to Barry Schuster had done, let me see. Barry Schuster had pulled together all of the recommendations and all of the work that we had done to right here to the working draft, which starts with definitions. But if we want to go ahead down to provision 1, we can look into the provisions. We'll just follow our agenda, look at provisions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then look at definitions, then provision 6. And then Diane Root had reminded me that we need to talk about the purpose statement. So we will address all of these things that we can this evening. So if you can scroll down a little bit more, Paula, down to provision 1. Or wait, back up. No, sorry, thank you. You were right there. So provision 1, according to Barry's compilation, now would read, no law enforcement agent or other agent or agency of the City of Lebanon or any volunteer assisting the efforts of such agent or agency shall profile, target, detain, or otherwise discriminate against any person because of any of the following, whether actual or perceived: age, sex, gender identity, race, creed, color, marital status, familial status, physical or mental disability, national origin, sexual orientation, ethnicity or culture, language or religion, economic or housing status, or citizenship or immigration status. That is provision 1. Now provision 2 has a reference to provision 1, so I think I'll read provision 2 as well. It says, no person shall be questioned in a manner which is biased or discriminatory as described in provision 1, and no personal information may be collected, retained, utilized, or disclosed in any discriminatory manner or to any discriminatory purpose or effect by any agent or agency of the city. So I've just read the provision 1 and provision 2 of the draft that Barry had put together, that task force Barry Schuster had put together for based on all of the discussions we've had. I just want to note a couple of things. One is that we had agreed, we had quite a lot of discussion about what is the purpose of provision 1, what is the purpose of provision 2, and we really agreed that when it came down to it, it was about prohibiting discrimination. So we fundamentally agreed on that as being the underlying motivation. We had a number of conversations. There's the language, whether actual or perceived. We had a conversation one evening specifically talking about race and using the language actual or perceived. We had a discussion about how race is really a social construct. And so the language about actual or perceived was discussed as being a way to kind of address that. So I see that that's in there. We also had a discussion early on. There was a reference to housing status as being something that we wanted to protect as a protected category. Of course, citizenship and immigration status is in there. So there we go. This is the proposed language based on numerous conversations that we've had over the summer, and I'd like to open it up to the task force to have some continued discussion about this. And I guess task force members, if you would like to speak, you can just unmute yourself and go ahead. And as always, we'll just be respectful. And every once in a while, we try to talk at the same time, but that's just how it is on these remote meetings. But we'll give everyone a chance.
So does silence mean that everything's good?
That's a great question. All right. Anyone have a thought? Yeah, Casey, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think these two provisions together combine both the spirit and the language that in the original provision 1, and I'm quite happy with them. So I think
Okay.
we accomplished what we said for in this particular one.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you, Casey. Let's see. Devin, Diane, Kathy, Sue, any thoughts on this?
I'm just looking at my own copy. It's easier to read. I'm good. No, I think you nailed it.
Great. All right. I mean, my sense is that it does reflect our conversations. I'm not seeing anything that stands out that we have left out or not added. Let's see. Devin, I know you're also here. It would be great if everyone could weigh in. That way, if anyone does have reservations, we can at least put them on the record now so that we can address them. So Devin, I'll give you a chance to unmute yourself and we'll give you a little time, but it would be great if everyone could weigh in, even in, I guess, in a sort of straw poll kind of a format. We're not voting officially, but do we think that this reflects I guess, the question I would ask, do provision 1 and provision 2 as proposed here reflect a consensus view that we can recommend to the Lebanon City Council?
This is Devin, if I can be heard. Yep. I have no problem with it. I think this looks great. Seems to incorporate all of our concerns, and I personally would be in favor of this as it's written here.
Thank you very much, Devin.
Karen, do we want to do a straw poll? Just, I mean, I know we're not, are we, I guess from a process perspective, and maybe I missed something. We're going to go through each provision and just see if there's any questions about how they're now currently drafted. Deal with any questions that might come up. Obviously, if there's any input that Bernie has, and then, get prepared for the, the final vote, which I think will be at the next meeting. Is that the direction we're going in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea. And I should have said at the beginning of the meeting that, I forget if I did actually, that we need to make a recommendation to the Lebanon City Council by the end of the month. And so we technically could fit in 2 more meetings this month if we have to. But I think if we are close enough, we may be able to, raise any last questions or concerns or issues that we have tonight, and then deal with those on September 15th, and ultimately conclude our work and hopefully adopt some consensus recommendations on the 15th. If we have to, though, it's nice to know that we do have a meeting on the 29th that we can use if necessary, and still meet the deadline that was laid out by the council. So yes, that would absolutely be my idea of going through the provisions as proposed and giving a chance for task force members and then also the public to weigh in, and getting anything out on the table tonight so that we can address them either tonight or give until the next meeting to deal with it. So Yeah, you've laid it out exactly perfectly, Sue. Go ahead.
Right. So one and two.
Yep, so 1 and 2, I've heard Sue, you're comfortable with this. I've heard Casey is comfortable with this. Devin is comfortable with this. I am also comfortable with this language. The other 2 task force members we have with us tonight are Diane and Kathy. So would you be able to address provisions 1 and 2 at this time?
Yeah, I probably had the last whack at it, so I'm happy.
Great. All right. Thank you, Diane. Kathy,
Yeah.
what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that I think it's very clear that this is about discrimination, and yeah, I'm happy with it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this is Bernie Waugh. One of the questions that was left over last time with respect to provision 1, I think it was in provision 1, was the question of whether it should include informants or not. And I know that I had some exchange with Kathy Beckett during the week, and I understand she asked also Attorney Kelly whether this was sufficient given the later definition that you have also discussed last week of the term agents. And she apparently thought it was, and so did I. And so I'm hoping that we can agree that the term informants doesn't have to be in there because it's covered by the term agents as defined in Devin's suggestion from last time.
Okay, excellent. And thank you for raising that question, Bernie. And let's go ahead and accept this as we've discussed, and we can revisit when we come to the definitions. But that's a very good point, because of course the provisions are related to each other. So so definitions will come back into play. Okay, let's see. I am actually looking in the chat, and I see from Carol Rushvi, if I've said that right, this is a line editing point in provision 1. She's offering a suggestion: change physical or mental disability to physical or mental ability for consistency with the rest of the categories. Ah, I see. Okay. Yes, I mean, that seems like an edit that makes sense to me. Then it's like you're making the categories all similar. They're more of, I guess the categories in a way are like affirmative categories as opposed to, what would be the other word? Disaffirmative? Anyway, does that make sense? Or task force members, any thoughts on that? That's an interesting. Yes, Bernie, thoughts?
I just you know, I understand the comment, and I don't see anything wrong with it, except for the fact that I did attempt to copy the language that's used in the state law against non-discrimination for all of the categories that are in that law, which are all the ones that are listed here down through sexual orientation. So I guess, you know, just to make sure that it's consistent with state law, I would suggest not changing that.
And I suppose Carol should probably talk to one of her favorite state legislators to talk about changing the state law, because it sounds like what we're hearing is that this is not so much an issue of our language, but it's actually state language. That's an interesting point as well. Okay.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Perhaps we could say both, regardless of ability or disability.
All right.
I don't think anybody's going to have problems with knowing what that means. So I don't really have that much of an objection.
All right. I like Casey's idea. Anyone have any thoughts on that? That's a.
Yeah, this is Devin.
Yes.
I want to thank Carol for pointing that out. I do agree that changing it to ability would be far preferable, given the concept of ability is a spectrum in the same way that we're looking at any of these others as inclusive rather than exclusive categories. It doesn't limit the factors being covered as those listed as disabilities. To the extent that current language prefers differently abled or levels of ability rather than a Boolean, are you disabled or are you not disabled? So I think I would push in favor of Carol's suggestion.
Devin, are you comfortable with Casey's suggestion, which would say ability or disability, so that we can use more inclusive language, but we can also include the, kind of obsolete language, but be that as it may in current law?
I don't know if I see the desire to keep it in line with what's currently in the state law, but I wonder if it would be necessary to have both ability and disability listed if ability necessarily includes levels of ability that would be characterized as disability.
Bernie, is there a way we can address? Bernie, is there a way we can address this in the definitions?
I'm sorry, I don't think that this is, I don't think that this term is defined. I mean, I suppose we could, but
could we define it to say, could we define a term to say that physical or mental ability, change the language to say in the provision to say physical or mental ability, and then include a definition that says physical or mental ability includes includes disability as is commonly referenced or perceived in the statute,
or even cross-reference a state definition. Sure, that would take care of it.
All right, I would propose that we do that. That way we can do what Carol has suggested and use the more inclusive, and as Devin has affirmed, and Casey, of using the inclusive language of physical or mental ability, and then by adding the definition to include the reference to the state statute, we can address the legal concern. Does that sound good to everyone? I see a thumbs up from Casey. I see a head nodding from Kathy. Who else? Sue? I just don't see everyone's faces. Okay.
Diane, it's good by me.
Diana's good.
Sorry, I can't tell when my light's on or off. I'm sorry. Yes, you can see it. Sorry, I'm here.
Good. Sue is good. All right, Devin, are you good with that?
Yeah, at the moment, I suppose so. I don't see any immediate objection to it.
Okay. Now, Phil and Judy Bush have also said, provision 1 says agent or any volunteer assisting. The definition of agent above includes volunteers. Is this unnecessarily redundant, or does it refer to volunteers other than those defined above? The volunteer language is not included in later provisions. Bernie, I'm going to ask you about this. Provision 1 says agent or any volunteer assisting. Is that redundant? You can think about that and come back later. I'm not going to play the Jeopardy.
I don't have the current definitions right in front of me right now, so
Okay,
I'm not sure I can answer that.
Let's note that and make sure that we address it. I'm sure.
I think it's worth saying that we only made changes where we thought they were necessary, and the or any volunteer assisting their efforts language, I think, came from the original voter passed version, and so it wasn't changed because there was no need to. But it depends on what the group's goal is. Is it to make minimum changes or what? So, I mean, I think the definition is probably of agent is probably adequate without the term volunteer, but it doesn't hurt sometimes to have belt and suspenders.
Ooh, belt and suspenders. Oh, very good. That's a good concept. Belt and suspenders. In this case, it would refer to belt and suspenders for the definition of volunteers.
Right.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Let's carry on. We can now move on to provision 3. And if you don't mind scrolling up a little bit more, Paula, I'll read provision 3 as proposed. Says, no agent or agency of the City of Lebanon shall request, collect, or retain information about or otherwise investigate or assist in the investigation of the United States citizenship or immigration status of any person in the City of Lebanon. And I think provision 3 and provision 4 kind of go together. So I'm going to read provision 4 as well. No agent or agency of the city shall disclose information regarding the U.S. citizenship or immigration status of any person unless such disclosure has been authorized in writing by the individual to whom such information pertains, or if such individual is a minor or is otherwise not legally competent by the individual's parent or guardian. Okay, and so we had quite a bit of discussion about this as well. So provision 3, let's see. So first of all, one of the things is that you'll notice that we are now saying United States citizenship, because we wanted to clarify that we are specifically talking about U.S. citizenship. So that's one thing. Another thing is that we had discussion with the police chief, who told us that in fact it is the policy in the police department in Lebanon that they do not right now request, collect, or retain information about or otherwise investigate certainly that they do not investigate or assist in the investigation of United States citizenship or immigration status of any person. He did tell us that from time to time when they are verifying someone's identity, that they may ask for identification papers, and if people have identification papers from other countries, that those may be turned over. So we had a good conversation with the police chief and asked him a lot of questions. We had really some robust discussion about provisions 3 and also provisions 4. So here we go. This is the language that Barry has put together. And I see, let's see, why don't we have some discussion as a group about these two provisions, provisions 3 and provisions 4. And I think this is the thing, is that I do want to say that the absence of, or let's see, silence. I don't want to take silence as consent, right? So I'm gonna say that consent is an affirmative action that we need to take, because I don't want to just assume that everyone is consenting. And, you know, maybe that's something that we can all think about in broader terms too, but I don't want to just take silence as consent. So it would be helpful if we could go around the table and talk about these two provisions, whether saying that we're comfortable with them or whether we're saying that we think more work needs to be done, you know, or something in the middle.
Diane, yeah, I would just say, I think, as I recall these two provisions with the specifying of United States citizenship, that basically they are as written in the original ordinance, except that the exclusions were moved down to provision, what is now provision 5.
Right.
I think they're pretty much as they were originally written, and good by me, you know.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you. And thank you for pointing out, Diane, that the exclusions, we know provision 5 now has a series of exclusions, and they really kind of need to be all read together, which I can do shortly. But with that intro from Diane, let's see, do others want to weigh in at this point?
So this is Kathy. I would say, for me, it makes sense to also read provision 5 in order, and to look at these
As holistically.
You know.
Great. Okay, Kathy, why don't I go ahead and read provision 5? And I'll just say one for the record that the reason I'm reading these is because the city keeps audio recordings, you know, sort of indefinitely. And I just don't know in the future if the visual recording will always be available. And so I'm reading them because I think it's important for the record to have that, to have the language read into the record as well. So I'll go ahead and read provision 5. I think it's a good point. The provision 3, 4, and 5 are really intended to be together. So provision 5 says, notwithstanding provisions 1 through 4 above, agents of the city may question about, collect, retain, utilize, and disclose information concerning the criteria listed in provisions 1 through 4 in the following circumstances, as long as that is done on an impartial basis and in a non-discriminatory manner. A, where collection, retention, utilization, or disclosure of the specific information is mandated in order to implement a municipal program, process, or function unrelated to the enforcement of federal immigration law, which is performed by the city, but whose rules and parameters are imposed by state or federal law or authority, including but not limited to federal and state laws governing employment and elections. B, where collection, retention, utilization, or disclosure of the specific information is required or procedurally necessary as part of an ongoing investigation of a violation of law, including but not limited to a violation of this ordinance itself, or as part of litigation, or a quasi-judicial administrative proceeding unrelated to the enforcement of federal immigration law, or by statute or court order. C, where the information is being collected or retained solely for purposes of evaluating and improving the performance of the police department or other city agency with respect to its compliance with the impartiality and non-discrimination requirements of provision 1 above. D, where relevant economic information is being collected, retained, or utilized in the course of administering a program of benefits based on financial need, including but not limited to general assistance under RSA Chapter 165. And so provision 5, provision 3 and provision 4. So provision 3 says you can't collect, request, collect, or retain any information or otherwise investigate or assist in the investigation of the United States citizenship or immigration status of any person in the city of Lebanon. So no, we're not going to investigate, we're not going to assist in investigations about citizenship or immigration status. Number 4 talks about disclosing information regarding US citizenship or immigration status of anyone unless they have actually given consent. And then number 5 gives specific exclusions where you actually can question, collect, retain, or disclose information in very specific circumstances, and it has to still be done in an impartial or non-discriminatory manner. And A is about when it's basically when it's unrelated to enforcing federal immigration law. So we talked about, for example, registering to vote. You have to ask someone's citizenship status, U.S. citizenship status, in order to register to vote. And so we didn't want to get in the way of that function, which is an important municipal function. B talks about when it's necessary as part of an ongoing investigation of a violation of law, potentially even investigating a violation of this law that we're talking about passing, or other proceedings. And C is about when it's collecting data, and this was a big thing for me. This was, I got to say, one of my biggest things, when it was about collecting data so that we can actually analyze whether our departments are actually being non-biased and being impartial. And so the police chief talked about how he collects this data and does an analysis every year to see whether there are any areas that are where there are different groups of people who are being disproportionately stopped or impacted by law enforcement. And I thought that was an important one. I know a number of people had that concern. So that was C. And then D, we also talked about how housing assistance or different kinds of social assistance is given partially based on certain factors like financial need, and we didn't want to get in the way of people doing that. So I kind of think of the exclusions as being the trying to avoid the unintended consequences. So I don't know if hopefully that's helpful. And I see we're getting to 7:45. So why don't we go ahead and have task force members weigh in at this point on the 3, 4, and 5 together, and then we can go ahead and start having public testimony. Kathy, can I ask you or was that Devin? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in with what might generally seem like a minor and argumentative point, but that in one instance seems potentially more important, that in most of the ordinance, we're using the serial comma or the Oxford comma. And I noticed that in provision 5 and also in, I think, serial list of provision 2, we don't have them. And I think in one case that could be potentially confusing, but in others it might just be good for consistency's sake.
Are you arguing for or against the use of the serial comma, Devin?
Well, I always argue for it, but in this case, I'm arguing in favor of it because it's used elsewhere in the ordinance, and with the inconsistent use, it could make some of these lists a little confusing. Okay. So I'm arguing for it.
I always support the use of the serial comma, for the record. If that's the most challenging issue, then I think that's good. All right. Anyone else object? All right, Bernie. Oh, wow.
I'm trying to understand that last comment. I don't have a copy of what Barry put together, so I don't understand how the commas are different in what Barry put together than they were on the draft that Diane and I put together for last time. I'm just curious because, of course, a comma can mean a huge difference in interpretation.
Sure, I'll jump in here. I don't know as though this differs from anything else. It's probably an oversight that was there from the beginning, but the example that I see is in provision 3. The first line doesn't have a comma after collect, and since there's a serial comma in everything else, I'm not sure if that's meant to imply that the agent or agency cannot request the citizenship or immigration status, or if it means they can't request information about the citizenship or immigration status. And then in a few other cases, I see on one end or the other of a form of the word utilized, we're missing the serial comma that could make it questionable as to what portions of the list apply to the second clause. So I don't know as though it was a change between versions that we've worked on. It's rather, I think, something that may have been inconsistent from the very beginning that I thought should be addressed and made more consistent for the final draft.
I think the intention is the serial comma, and so let's just go ahead and put the serial comma in there. Should request, so in provision 3, request comma, collect comma, or retain information about. That way everyone can read it to say, no agent or agency of the city shall request information. No agent or agency of the city shall collect information. No agent or agency of the city shall retain information. Da, da, da. So wherever a serial comma belongs, we will put it in there. Yeah, after utilize, after A, paragraph, provision 5, paragraph A, utilization. Actually, I think, Devin, would you also say in provision 5, paragraph A, after, in order to, where collection, retention, utilization, comma, or disclosure of the specific information is mandated in order to implement a municipal program, comma, process, comma, or function, comma, would you put a comma there after process?
I think so. It looks like that's the intention.
Yeah. So, all right, there's a bunch of serial, we've got a bunch of serial lists, and we'll just make sure that there's commas there. Okay, I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't think we need to talk about it too much more. Thank you for catching that. You are a good copy editor there, Devin. Thank you for your eagle eyes.
Okay, well, while we're right there in that section, I don't know if this is necessary or not. Looking in provision 5A, I'm just wondering whether there's any ambiguity where it says unrelated to the enforcement of federal immigration law, which is performed by the city, but whose rules, blah, blah, blah. I just wondered, is that fine, or do we need to move the phrase?
Which is performed by the city?
Yeah.
Yes. Good question. Okay.
Just to flag that as a question.
All right.
Yeah, I could see changing the order in that sentence.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Bernie, will you make sure you note that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that, Diane.
If I may,
Please.
on provision 5C, I think the very last sentence should say requirements of provision 1 and 2 above, as we split the original 1 into 1 and 2.
Correct. Yeah. Good catch. Yep. All right. That's good. I saw Bernie nodding his head, so I think he caught that one as well. Thank you. See, this is why it's good to have a team. We all catch something. It's good. All right. What else? Let's have a straw poll then on looking at provisions 3. Okay, before I do a straw poll, let us go to public testimony since it is 7:52, and I promised we would do it around 7:45. So let's go ahead, and if there are any members of the public who wish to speak, we're happy to listen to you. If you are on the phone, you can just press *6 to unmute yourself and participate. And I don't really have a way to recognize you because some people I can see, but some people I can't. So just if you want to speak, please go ahead and do so. And if you're not speaking, if you want to mute yourself, that would be great too.
This is Phil Bush. I just wanted to clarify my comment about volunteer. since Bernie doesn't have any of the text. And you haven't talked about definitions yet, but the definition of agent includes the last sentence that says the term includes any volunteer acting on behalf of an agency, as well as any person with access to agency information which is not available to the general public. And provision 1 says no law enforcement agent or other agent or agency of the City of Lebanon or any volunteer assisting the efforts of such agent or agency shall profile, etc. So I was confused because a volunteer is already an agent according to the definitions, and yet you're saying an agent or a volunteer, as if a volunteer. To me, that grammatically means the volunteer is not an agent, or you wouldn't volunteer. So that may be a trivial thing, but
We're getting, Paula, would you be able to mute everyone? We're just getting a lot of feedback from someone.
so
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify my comment, and I remain a little confused because it seems to imply that in provision 1 that a volunteer is not an agent, even though they are defined as an agent above.
Okay.
And I understand that provision 1 of the ordinance did say or volunteers, but I think it's because we didn't think a volunteer was necessarily an agent. Now it's defined.
Okay, that's a good point. Thank you, Phil. And let's, Barry, if you want to give some thought to that, we are going to come up to definitions after we address public testimony. So if you want to take a look at that with the definitions, and then, now we do have this new language of provision 1. So let's think about, and it's true, I think it was Devin who said we didn't, that we weren't necessarily looking at cleaning up everything. We were looking at the areas that really had to be addressed, not maybe the ones that could be addressed, but it could be, if there's a question out there, it's better to address it now while we can. So sounds like this is one that we still have that's an outstanding question. So thank you for that, Phil. Let's see, who else from the public would like to offer some testimony? You are welcome to do so. Go ahead and unmute yourself and offer your thoughts.
This is Attorney Kelly, or Kira. I'm on the line, and would love to just jump in and kind of speak to what I think that was Philip Bush just said about provision 1 and the language of informants and volunteers. And I got to have a conversation with Kathy and kind of with Attorney Waugh through Kathy, and I think that we came to a good place around what the informant language would mean if left in and if left out, and I think we could maybe apply that logic to volunteer as well. Just that with the definition of agent being the way that it is in this current version, and I understand that you haven't all gone through that definition section yet, but if an agent is a person employed by or acting on behalf of an agency, specifically including volunteers, that covers both volunteers and informants. So then in provision 1, the way that it's written, Attorney Waugh suggested taking informants out because informants would already be covered in the definition. And like Philip has noticed, volunteers are also covered in the definition as well. So provision 1 could read, no law enforcement agent or other agent or agency of the City of Lebanon shall profile, target, and kind of go on from there without needing to include either informants or volunteers, since both of those subsects of people are included in the definition of an agent as it's written right now. And also just kind of speaking to, this might be getting a bit into the weeds, but the way that the law works regarding informants. The way that existing constitutional law works, if we think about the Fourth Amendment, say, so if a law enforcement officer wants to go in your house and look for something incriminating, they need a warrant, or it has to be, they have to go through the Fourth Amendment protections to go in your house. And an informant has to follow that same protections, like your rights apply the same to informants, but only after they have entered an arrangement with law enforcement, after they have, I guess, been flipped, as you might say. So if somebody is not yet an informant and they go in your house and they don't have a warrant or probable cause or any of the other exceptions to the Fourth Amendment, then that doesn't matter because they have not yet become an agent of the law enforcement officer. So that's, I think probably a good thing for the town, because they don't have to worry about everybody's history before they become a volunteer, before they become an informant, before they kind of start performing the functions of law enforcement officers or of the town. And we don't have to worry about what somebody might have, like, what violations of the ordinance might have occurred by a civilian, to use that word to distinguish them from law enforcement or informants, before they became in the service of law enforcement. I don't know if that makes sense, or if people want to talk more about that, I would be happy to go on. But I think suffice it to say that informant and volunteer are superfluous when included in Provision 1, and I would love to confirm with Attorney Waugh that that was his understanding as well. But that as long as the definition says volunteer specifically and includes agents, then informants is covered as well.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. And thank you for being here all along the way as well, Kira. Bernie, you're...
Yes, I will withdraw my comment about belt and suspenders. That makes sense to me.
Okay, so it's this parallel thinking that if informants is included in the definition, then we don't need to reiterate it in Provision 1. And so along that thinking, if volunteer is included in the definition, then we don't need to reiterate it in Provision 1.
Yes, and as the other gentleman, I don't know his name, sorry, but leaving it in Provision 1 actually raises doubt as to whether a volunteer is an agent. So it should be taken out.
Okay, good. Well, that sounds like that was very helpful. Okay. Anyone else from the public? Go ahead and unmute yourself and offer your thoughts. Okay, well, not hearing anyone else yet. If anyone has not been able to speak, you can put something in the chat and I will keep my eye there and incorporate it. I have to say, I think the chat is actually very helpful, just because we're able to then include people's thoughts along the way in our discussion. So thank you for including your thoughts. Let's see, Carol and Phil and Judy Bush into the conversation. So we can recognize anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak as we go along, but let's go back to our discussion. I think we are now going to, let's do a straw poll with the task force then on provisions 3, 4, and 5. And I'd like to open that up to members of the task force. At this point, it's not a vote that's written in stone. It's just are we feeling comfortable? Do we have consensus around the language that is as proposed, that I would say is now going as proposed in provisions 3, 4, and 5? It'd be great to hear from everyone that way. If anyone has concerns or reservations, we can register them tonight and have a chance to address them.
Casey here, for the record, it's looking good.
Thank you.
Sue for the record, and I really like how Provision 5 has now been laid out.
Great, thank you.
In particular.
Good.
Kathy?
This is Devin.
Kathy, go ahead, and then Devin will be after Kathy.
Yeah, I think that Diane and Bernie did a good job of providing these clarifications through provision 5. And yeah, I think this is what's given here is a good result. So, thank you.
Good. Thank you, Kathy. Devin.
I agree with the above comments. Good work.
All right. Great. Thank you, Devin. Let's see, Diane, what are you?
Yeah, I want to make sure and give Bernie all the credit for provision 5. He did a great job on that, and yeah, I'm quite satisfied.
Great. All right. I am feeling very positive about this as well. So, okay, let's see. So tentatively, I don't want to brag or anything, but I think we've gotten through provisions 1 through 5. All right. So we're moving right along. Now, next, yeah, go ahead. Did someone start speaking? You're welcome. If you want to. Okay. Let's see. Next up, we have definitions on our agenda. So, all right, Paula is going to get us to the definitions section. Okay. All right. And so, okay. I guess instead of me reading it all, I think we do need to read it all for the record, but instead of me reading it all, maybe we can all take turns. So I'll start it and then, let's see, Devin, I think you worked on this a lot. So why don't I ask you to read, you know, the next couple of sections after me, and then someone else can volunteer. So I'll start it off, and then Devin, if you don't mind, let's see, definitions. As used in this ordinance, the following words and phrases shall mean and include administrative warrant. Quote, administrative warrant means an immigration warrant issued by a federal agency charged with the enforcement of civil immigration laws used as a non-criminal civil warrant for immigration purposes. Devin, go ahead.
Sure. Agency. Agency means every department, agency, division, commission, council, committee, board, or other body of the City of Lebanon established by authority of state law, the Lebanon City Charter, or an ordinance, executive order, or order of the Lebanon City Council. Agent. Agent means any person employed by or acting on behalf of an agency whenever any such person is acting within the scope of that person's employment or agency capacity, or when utilizing or disclosing any information that may be learned in the course of that person's employment or agency capacity. The term includes any volunteer acting on behalf of an agency, as well as any person with access to agency information which is not available to the general public. Citizenship or immigration status. Citizenship or immigration status means all matters regarding questions of citizenship of the United States or any other country, or of the authority to reside in or otherwise be present in the United States. Is there anyone who wants to read the last two? I can keep going if not.
I can do it.
Okay, excellent. On to you.
On to you. So I'm going to hold on. I'm going to put it on my big screen. So federal immigration, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Federal immigration authorities. A federal immigration authorities means federal agencies, departments, or employees tasked with the enforcement of immigration law and border entry, including without limitation, the Department of Homeland Security, in parentheses DHS, Immigration Control and Enforcement, ICE, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, CBP. I'm going to go on immigration detainer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Immigration detainer means an official request by ICE or another federal agency charged with the enforcement of similar civil immigration laws to another federal, state, or local law enforcement agency to detain an individual based on any violation of a civil immigration law, or notify ICE or other federal immigration agency of a person's release from custody.
Okay, and so that is the proposed
Slate.
definitions section for the Welcoming Lebanon ordinance. And we did, like I said, we talked about, let's see, a citizenship agent came up, as we've talked about earlier, which now includes informant and also would include volunteer. So we believe that agent, as it is defined here, would include informants and volunteers. And I just want to ask Bernie, will you confirm that for us?
I guess I want to make sure I know what you mean by confirm. Does that mean that I'm going to produce a new copy of this or something and
No,
make changes to
I
it?
just want you to confirm that. No, I just want you to confirm that by your orally confirm it that right now our understanding of this definition of agent would include, if we remove that phrase volunteer from provision 1, we're satisfied that it is covered here under agent.
Yes, I am at least.
And you're the one that's going to have to argue it if it ever goes to court. So that's important. Okay, so then are there any other, Devin, you were the one that worked on this. Do you want to start off our discussion on definitions?
Well, I can, but for the most part, I don't think there's too much to say. Attorney Watt and I went back and forth on the definitions that were originally in other ordinances that have been passed to make sure they are applicable to Lebanon, and as best as possible, only what we need and hopefully precisely what we need. So what we have here is the finished product that I'm happy with, and I think addresses the concerns that we may have had, particularly pertaining to the question of agents.
Excellent. Thank you, Devin. All right, so maybe we can have a straw poll. Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that on the definition of immigration detainer, which is the last definition, perhaps we could save some language at the end of the first line after ICE, because federally agency charged with the enforcement of civil immigration law has already been defined in the previous definition as a federal immigration authorities. So if we say after ICE, say or other federal immigration authorities, will save us a bunch of words there, because that's already been defined. I don't know if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm. I see exactly what you mean. Bernie, I think that's right. Do you agree?
It sounds right. Again, I'm having trouble reading this because for some reason I wasn't distributed Barry's summary, so I'm just reading it online. But it sounds like that would be correct.
Okay, I think that's correct. And and Bernie, you can look at it again for next time, but because we're gonna have Bernie, you've got a running list of a couple of things. We've only talked about really a couple of things, but you've got a couple of things that we're gonna change for the next draft, right?
Right, I do.
Okay, so just put that on the list for you to take a look at, but I think Casey's right on it. Okay, other than that, Casey, are you good with this?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, other task force members.
This is Kathy. I'm fine with it.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Diane and Sue. Oh, Diane, you've got the kitty cat.
I know, and we're both fine with this, yeah.
Great. I feel better about everything.
I know, it's true.
All right, where's Maisie? Sue, where's Maisie?
Let's be quiet because she is in the other room. She has not heard Sean Mulholland's voice. So
Okay.
she's not running in here right now. This is
All right.
good.
It would be the battle of Diane, what's your cat's name?
This is Jessie.
Jessie. It could be the
Yeah.
battle of Jessie and Maisie.
Yeah.
All right, well, we don't want battles. Okay, Sue, then, all right, so Diane and Jessie are good with it. Sue, how are you? Are you?
I'm good.
All right. Thumbs up with the definitions. Okay, I think definitions are in good shape. That's great. Let's see if we can, so we've got provision 6, and then we've got purpose statement. Why don't we take up provision 6? This is actually like the one that we started with, and it was probably the most controversial. But it seems like there's been consensus. So let's see. Paula, can you go ahead and pull up the new, so provision 6 is now like provision, I don't know, provision 9 or something like that. Can you, I don't know, maybe we've lost Paula. Paula, are you still there? She is.
Suggest revise, yeah, so it would be 7, it would be 8, it's 8 now.
Okay. So
Is what
Paula, if you're able to
did.
bring us down to provision, it used to be provision 6, but it's now going to be after that. Provision 8. She's doing it. I see it. All right, wait, nope, go back. Wait, did we talk about provision 7? Hold on. Can you go back up? Yeah. No, go down to, no, actually you're right exactly where you were, and just leave it there is good. We didn't actually, this is now this was a little brain issue on my part, is that we modified provisions 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then 5. So now we have, so provisions 1, 2, and 3 are now provisions 1 through 4, 1 through 5 rather. And so now we have to talk about, well, provisions 6 and 7, which were before 4 and 5. But as I recall, we didn't have many issues with these. So is there anyone who thinks that we need to, darn it. I wanted to get down into provision 6. Let's go down and deal with provision 6. I'd rather do that. So now provision 8, I'm sorry, Paula, but everyone just remember, we have to come back to those two, okay? But I think provision 8 is worth us talking about tonight before we conclude our meeting. So Sue, can I turn this over to you? Maybe you can read what's here as proposed, and then we can have discussion.
So it's as is, if any agent or agency becomes aware of the Federal Immigration Authority's presence in the city for the purposes, wait a minute, no, that's formerly original paragraph, sorry, revised, in order to maintain public safety and the orderly processes for all citizens traveling in and through the city of Lebanon, the presence of checkpoints along our roads and highways that interfere with the flow of traffic should be reported to the public. If any agent of the city becomes aware of a Federal Immigration Authority's presence at said checkpoint in the city for the purposes of questioning, detaining, or gathering immigration status information from any person or persons or other enforcement action, the city shall act to notify the public as soon as they become aware. This should be done by both the City of Lebanon and community organizations once they become aware. Notification can be made through the Lab Alert system, as well as a partner organization communications protocols, as well as, should it say the partner organizations or no,
it doesn't say it just says
funky.
It says as well as partner organization communications protocols.
Okay. I mean, so this is as we've discussed, and added the public safety, the interruption of traffic. Well, the interruption of traffic and the ability of residents, citizens traveling through Lebanon as being the priority. We are the home. We have 2 hospitals, and we're the home to, the major medical center in large, in the city. And so, any interruption to that traffic is important, or the orderly processes for that traffic is important. And then it does state in here, and this is where we had a little bit of a back and forth, what the exact purpose of that interruption was. And the proper notification would be made. And what was changed there too was as soon as they become aware, because that's, that we might not be aware, say for 15, 20 minutes to a half an hour, either partner organization of the city, but once we become aware, that's when it's incumbent upon us to put the notice, make the proper notice.
And I know we had some discussion too about that the original language was not specifically related to checkpoints or tying it to public safety.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a good discussion in the group about how the intent was to try and figure out how to address the ambiguity in the language that was concerning to legal counsel, and we also were recognizing that Bernie basically told us that he's never really going to be comfortable with this provision. He's only going to be more or less comfortable with it, and so we recognize that he's always going to have a certain amount of discomfort with this. But it seemed like the task force was really committed to keeping this provision in here in some way. And so one way to mitigate the concerns, the legal concerns, was to add in this specific connection to public safety. So that way there could be some, it would add a justification and a rationalization to this, as opposed to simply being a notification clause that could potentially be argued to be interfering with the federal government's ability to do their job. So the idea was that by adding this public safety component, we could address this potential issue around interference. So we know it's not 100% in keeping with the language as passed, but I think the idea is that we've modified it a bit so that we can keep it in here, and it's close to what was passed. It still honors the spirit, but also addresses the legal concerns. So that was the nature of the conversation that we've had. And I'm seeing here, Phil and Judy Bush have said, I'm curious why the first sentence language is limited to citizens only. I think by citizens right here, we meant people.
Yes, if I may.
Yeah, Casey.
Yeah, that was the only comment that I was going to make, that we should change the word citizen to persons.
Okay, persons. Yeah. Yep, Sue?
Yeah, I completely agreed. That I stumbled through the reading of that because I was like, why are we using the word citizen? I've become very conscious of how I use that, not just in this conversation, but in all. So it should be anybody, people, anybody. It doesn't, whether they're a resident or a visitor, it's anybody driving in and around or present in the city at that time.
So I think persons would address that if we change it to say persons. Bernie, is there a difference between saying persons or people?
I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, it just seems like persons is more legally.
May I make some comments here?
You may.
I'll try not to say the same thing I said before about this, because you already know how I feel about this.
We do.
But there were 2 issues with the original that I raised. One is, whether it illegally interferes with federal immigration enforcement in a manner which would be held to violate federal law. And as you said, I think the chances of winning on that are about 50-50. The other, but while I'm there, I think, sorry, I'm trying to determine what order to make these comments in. The problem that the original had, and the other problem the original had, and which this also has, is it doesn't make it the central duty of any particular person to actually do this. So it's sort of unclear who's supposed to do it. Now, that's related to the other problem, because even though I'm an attorney appearing here on behalf of the city, if I were a city employee trying to decide whether to obey this, and I went to an attorney representing me as opposed to the city, you know, you've definitely got a federal law that says it is a criminal offense to interfere with federal law enforcement. So, you know, I think, for example, if you made it the city manager's duty to comply with this section, I tend to think if I were the city manager, I would go to court and say, should I do this or not? Because this ordinance is telling me to do it, and a federal law is telling me not to do it. And I think it's just going to put somebody in a really tenuous position. That's the point I want to make. I mean, if it's just somebody filing a declaratory judgment action against the city to test it out, that's probably nobody's going to have to worry about fines or prison time. But if it happens to be, you know, a specific person who's an agent, it really could be a problem. So anyway, I know I've said something similar to that before, but I don't think I said it quite that way before.
If I may, Casey here, I want to push back a little bit and say that to notify the residents that we have a traffic jam at point X and to bring that to a charge of interference, I could only see that happening under the current administration of the government. And if that were to be the case, I am all for, with all my tax money and my personal funds, to fight it.
Okay. Good point, Casey. All right, anyone else? Okay, so on this issue of, it's good that we're talking about this because so Bernie is saying that we did address one issue of, I mean, Bernie, does the addition of, regarding your concern about interference, does the addition of language about public safety act to mitigate your concern about a potential claim of interference?
Sure. You know, it raises my level of confidence in the city winning a declaratory judgment action up from about 50% to maybe 55 or 60.
Okay. And then but does the inclusion of that language that you're, you know, increasing your confidence to 55 or 60, does that also apply to the issue that you've raised about, you know, if it's a specific, if it's, you know, that an employee of the city, an agent of the city could then, what I guess, what's the risk that you're saying? What's the risk to the city for the second issue that you're raising?
What I'm pointing to is that it's a risk not just to the city, but to the individual who does this.
And what's the risk?
The risk is that they're violating a federal law, which I don't have a number right now, but which I've actually seen, you know, that says if you interfere with federal law enforcement, that constitutes a criminal offense.
So, Karen, can I ask you a question? Just want to be. Yeah. So, Bernie, you're saying that the person, not just the city, but the person who makes this notification is also.
If they're acting on behalf of the, as an agent of the city, yeah, they could be on the hook for personal damages and maybe even, jail time. That's what I'm concerned about.
Sorry.
And can we indemnify them? Could the city indemnify them?
I mean, don't we indemnify volunteers right now? People who are not just employees, but people who are, working at the polls for us or serving as volunteers on our committees. Don't they have any protection in doing their jobs?
They are indemnified from civil liability. They're not indemnified for criminal liability.
And you're saying that the interference is criminal?
It depends on how it was interpreted. What I'm saying is, if I was representing a person who's a staff member of the city, and they're asking me, should I follow this thing? I'm probably going to tell them I wouldn't do it without going to court first and making sure that it's legal. Because otherwise, it's a lot of risk for you.
No, I understand that. I'm asking you, is interfering with, this whole concern is interfering with federal law. Is that criminal? Do you have criminal liability for that, or do you have civil liability?
It's similar. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but my understanding is it's similar under federal law as it is to state law. I mean, you can't actively interfere with a law enforcement officer who's engaged in enforcing the law.
But do you face criminal liability or civil liability for that?
That would be criminal liability, yes.
I see. So you're saying
I'm not in my office, or I could go and look at the criminal code and pull it up for you.
Yeah,
the code that I think that you're talking about in front of me. This is Kira. I don't know if that would be helpful.
Sure, go ahead, Kira. What's up?
Yeah. So Attorney Wall, you can correct me if I am guessing the wrong statute that you're referencing, but 18 U.S. Code, Section 118, interference with certain protective functions. Any person who knowingly and willfully obstructs, resists, or interferes with a federal law enforcement agent engaged within the United States or the special maritime territorial jurisdiction of the United States in the performance of the protective functions, lists a bunch of statutes, shall be fined under the title, imprisoned not more than 1 year, or both. And that is a criminal law, but the federal statutes that prohibit interference with federal law enforcement, like the state statutes that exist in every state prohibiting interference with law enforcement officers, are generally reserved for the interference with an active arrest or an investigation, not an exploratory investigation such as these checklists or the mere presence. And then we could quibble over the Ninth Circuit case that I think is probably default at this point. But the pertinent language being that it is knowingly and willfully obstructing, resisting, or interfering. That is the kind of language. If you're just saying, hey, there's a checklist, you're not knowingly and willfully obstructing the kidnapping of an undocumented person. You are simply saying, hey, there's a traffic jam up ahead.
Okay, and that gets back to my...
I clearly did not research this question for tonight, but if you'd like me to, I will. I don't know whether the committee wants me to do that or not.
All right, let's talk about this committee, and I think this will be our last topic since it's 8:32. Provision 6. We have addressed potentially one of the, as much as we're going to, by adding the public safety question or public safety rationale. We've addressed part of the Attorney Wah's concern on this, but we still have an outstanding question about the individual liability of agents of the city who may perceive their responsibility to be, informing, let's see, what is it? In order of the presence, what shall be reporting to the public. So in our proposed notification plan or notification provision here, we're saying that agents of the city have to report to the public once they become aware that federal immigration authorities' presence, that the presence of checkpoints along our roads and highways that interfere with the flow of traffic. So public safety addresses part of it, but we're still dealing with this question of individual liability for city agents. Is that something that we would like to have the city attorney do some further research into for the next meeting? And I think that aside from provision 6, what we have left to do other than provision 6 is the purpose statement, which I don't anticipate we're going to have a lot of problem with. And then we also have to go back and deal with the new provisions 6 and 7, which were provisions 4 and 5 before that also I don't think are going to be a lot of work. So I think provision 6 is really the biggest thing we have to deal with. So the question is, do we want the city attorney to do some further work into looking at the question of individual liability for city agents with regard to the notification provision? So that's a question. I think that's a yes or a no question. Let's go around and ask everyone to weigh in. Sue.
Whether I agree or not, I think now that it's out there, there's not a way that we can proceed without knowing whether anybody is criminally on the and if it's it might be a matter of a shifting of some of the language. I mean, I think we've gotten at the public safety issue, but be that as it may, I don't think we can say. My opinion is I don't think we can say we don't want to know. Wouldn't we want to know? Because it gives us the opportunity to potentially adjust some of the language with keeping the full intent in place.
Okay.
My opinion, and I'm really interested to hear what other people think.
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring this, and I am particularly interested in seeing whether the definition of interference will encompass something as meaningless as saying we have a traffic jam at point A. Will that amount to interference?
Okay, good.
Karen?
Yeah.
It's Paula.
Yep.
And I normally wouldn't try to interject, but I am a city employee.
Yep.
So just seriously, from my perspective, I would be right smack dab between a rock and a hard place, because either I'm going to violate federal law or I'm going to violate a city ordinance. And how do I weigh that? And to what level does that put me at risk is absolutely a question I'm going to ask myself.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I think we have to explore this, and then I think I would certainly be in favor of exploring this. And then what I would also be in favor of, for Bernie is, if this is a real risk, and it sounds like it is, then how can we mitigate the risk? Because our charge as a task force is to try and keep as much of the original language as possible. And so how can we keep something in here related to the notification provision while also addressing these admittedly very difficult situations? We don't want to put city employees in a position like Paula's just articulated, between a rock and a hard place. We don't want them to have to choose and have their own personal, their own personal liability on the line. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have Bernie take a look at this. Diane, Devin, Kathy.
Yeah, so this is Kathy, and I would like to see if Kara would be willing to work with Bernie to develop, to respond to the concerns. I think that seems like as Casey said, is this interference is key to this. And so it'd be good to have, it'd be great if the two attorneys could work on this, if you're willing to do that, or Bernie and Kira.
Well, I can certainly send her whatever I come up with for comments and also respond to any comments she wants to make. That's fine. Sure.
Yeah, that might make sense. Kind of like, I think it's good to have all perspectives of this, the kind of like coming at it from a more conservative angle, not to put you in a box, Attorney Watt, but, coming at it from that, as well as from the, how can we make this work, and what actually might the risk be from a more, I don't know, there's something to be said for, I think, as Attorney Watt said before, not taking risks with taxpayers or with the town, or especially with city employees, and wanting to really make sure that we are not putting anybody in a place where they're being caught between that rock and the hard place. But just in my experience with these ordinances, that there is much more of a risk of a risk than there actually is of a risk. So I'd be happy to answer questions or to submit that perspective as well.
Good.
Okay, that's good. Diane? Devin?
Yep. This is Diane, and yeah, I concur with Kathy's suggestion that the two attorneys can present us with parallel arguments, and that would be helpful.
And this is Devin. I agree as well.
Okay, so it sounds like really this is going to be the main area that we have to address at our next meeting. So,
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, but when you summarized what the committee still has left, you left out a big thing which I worked with Kathy on.
You're right.
Is
I'm
enforcement.
Sorry.
And then there was the question that I addressed in an email to you and Kathy earlier today, which was this paragraph 5 of what used to be provision 5, or excuse me, provision 6. And Sean raised this 2 weeks ago. It is the question of whether the use of a nationwide database for who gets arrested where and things like that violates this provision. And,
Paula, can you scroll up? Paula, can you just scroll up real quick to this paragraph that he's talking about? Here we go. Go down a little bit. Yep, formally paragraph 5. Okay. And
number 6 right there at the bottom of the screen.
Number 6, respond to federal immigration authorities' inquiries or share information about an individual with federal immigration authorities. Such information includes but is not limited to the individual's custody status, release date, time, court dates, whereabouts, residence, employment, identification numbers, appearance, telephone number, and familial relations. For the purpose of aiding an individual who may qualify for a U.S. or T visa, information may be shared if such disclosure has been authorized in writing by the individual to whom such information pertains. And Bernie, can you just summarize for us what the question is that you have?
Yeah, well, it's not one that I had, but it was one that Sean raised 2 weeks ago. I am not I've never been a police officer, but based on what he said, it sounded like there is a nationwide database that police departments use, and they'll put down the names of, for example, the names of people who were arrested and at such and such a time. I mean, these are searchable by other law enforcement departments, including the federal law enforcement departments. And the question is whether this paragraph is intended to basically tell the police department they can't do that anymore, or if not, if they are still to be allowed to do that, maybe there should be a clarification in that paragraph. This is one of those things I'd rather leave it to the police department or Sean to explain exactly what the problem is, because because I don't have that kind of experience. But I mean, I think it does need clarification, one way or the other.
Good, and I just wanted to have you bring that up so that everyone can be prepared to think about that, and we can talk about it at our next meeting as well. Okay. So like Bernie said, we actually have provision 6. We still have provision, the former provisions 4 and 5, which are now 6 and 7, including this question that Bernie has just raised, particularly here on paragraph 6, provision 7, paragraph 6, having to do with this database. We can talk about more. We also have the purpose statement, and we also have the enforcement provision. So we still have some more work to do, and why don't we plan that we're going to have 2 more meetings, and if we can wrap it up on the 15th, we will. But we know that let's just go ahead and everyone plan to have 2 more meetings and to wrap it up at the last meeting in September. And that way, you know, it will be a bonus if we get to end early. Okay, so I think, does anyone have anything else to add at this time? Then let's go ahead. Could someone make a motion to adjourn, please?
Well, Karen, before we make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Is it possible at all, Bernie and Attorney Juan, Attorney Kelly, with provision 6, that I can come in on your conversation if it's convenient, since this is a provision I've been working on, and I'm just I'd like to participate in that discussion, if is that possible?
That's fine, sure. I think as long as it's not a quorum.
Yeah, it's not a quorum. At least just listen to it, because I have some thoughts on how maybe to do this, but I'd be interested in hearing your discussion. So can you, so I'll touch base with you, Bernie, and Kathy and Kira, just as long as I just want to loop into the conversation. Okay, because I have some thoughts, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. And with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn by Sue. Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
Nope.
Seconded by Diane, I think. And all right, we'll have a roll call vote. Sue?
Yes.
Diane?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Devin?
Yes.
And Karen votes yes, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you here 2 weeks from tonight.
This is super interesting.
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you. Good night.